Hi. So I've got Zoe Williams with me here today. She's flown all the way from Australia to be with us in Dubai, and we're going to have a conversation. We've known each other for about 20 years, and she's making huge waves, bringing emotional intelligence and more to the mining industry, which is mind-boggling. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Zoe.
Damian, thanks for the intro.
How was that?
That was great.
Yeah?
Yeah, I loved that.
I like the word mind-boggling.
Yeah, I think it's quite mind-boggling what I'm doing.
Mind-boggling.
I'm boggling minds. No, it's good to be here. Thank you.
Yes. So, 20 years. It's more than 20 years now, isn't it?
It's just over 20 years we first met. I was a graduate and you were starting out on your finance career as well. And we bumped into each other in the office, and immediate connection of energy and personality, and it's quite astonishing, really.
Yeah, I mean, if I'd known it was going to be a lifetime sentence, I'd have made different choices.
I'm sorry, you did try to get away several times.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. But we also worked at Virgin at the same time together.
It's a really strange. I think our journey is really actually quite interesting because we haven't designed it to be so serendipitous, but we have, if you look back, gone on very similar journeys professionally.
That's true.
We've had personal journeys that have been similar as well. So it's been quite strange because I was at Vodafone, you were at Vodafone, then we both went separate ways, then we came back to the same place again, separate again. Now we're back to the same place again.
Yeah.
So
I mean, not geographically, Australia's quite a long way from
it is
everywhere, but but now working or training, we both trained as coaches at about the same time.
Yeah.
You've always been somehow always a year or so in front of me, which has been quite useful. What else? Yeah.
Well, you were my inspiration to train as a coach, so you pushed me forward ahead of you by giving me that advice dinner here in Dubai about 6 years ago. You said, you'd be an awesome coach. I'm getting coached at the moment. You're really good at listening and asking me questions that make me really, think. And I don't know. So it was you that propelled me ahead of you. And then I think I provided you with some inspiration to go, oh, well, if she can do it, then all right, I'll give it a go.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I guess it was, it would have been about a year after you did or so, I left the corporate world to go coaching full time.
So the thing that I'd like to say about that, because the advice we often give others is advice we're giving ourselves. So when you were telling me about what you could see in me as a possibility, and the fact that I was 20 years into my corporate career, leading teams that were advising non-execs and execs on matters of strategic risk and all of that, never in a million years did I sit there and think, oh, well, this would really set me up for success as a coach. You saw that, because I believe you were seeing that as a possibility for yourself. And how, when you've got a 20-year corporate career, it's not a common thing to suddenly go, okay, I'm just going to completely change my career. I'm going to hope that the industry and the world accepts me as a coach, not as an accountant or a senior director or, the things that we were before. Complete shift in identity, starting from scratch effectively. So I believe in that moment you were giving me advice that you were also considering for yourself anyway.
Wow. That's incredible, because what's actually happened is, as I've moved through in the coaching industry and then are looking for people to work with as we do, I'm really struggling to find people that have got serious commercial chops, that have been toe-to-toe with C-level out in the big wide world, in multinationals, have lived day in, day out, really know what it's like, and are amazing coaches. Yeah. And there are loads of amazing coaches that haven't taken that route, but for the work I do with my clients, the impact of having someone that's got 25 years experience and been responsible for billions of dollars and hundreds of people, the impact in the coaching is building credibility is so quick and so legitimate that it means you can move into having the impact that you need to as a coach really quickly. Yeah. And also just being able to look, a CEO in the eyes, and they know that you get it, that you feel that you felt that pressure and understand what's going on behind the scenes. With very successful people in the corporate world, you judge your self-worth on your role. If people had asked me, like, who are you? I would have said, I'm a CFO of $1 billion business unit for Sony, right? Not a dreamer, a father, someone that's a bit silly, all of these things. Because people tie their self-worth up in their labels, their roles, externalise their self-worth.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps so many people stuck out of fear in roles and careers that aren't fulfilling for them. And I think one of the many reasons that I do this stuff is because I spent decades doing things that frankly weren't aligned with my natural strengths.
Yeah.
Things like consistency, analytical, discipline are really low down in my strengths or weaknesses. And I spent a decade as a finance analyst and finance manager living in really complicated spreadsheets and models, when all of my strengths are about influencing and communicating and connecting. And as a result, it had a really, really detrimental effect on my well-being. I would love that people make conscious choices in what they're doing in their careers based on their natural talents and their values, which I'm sure we're going to get into more in a bit. But when you bring these things together, you can be really, really good at what you do and really happy and enjoy it, and just, finding the things that you do that other people really struggle with but you find really easy, and making sure that you understand your values, really understand them, and understand what that means for how you behave when you're at your best. If you do that bit of work, you have so much a bigger impact and a more successful career, which in turn is repaid with, what's the word? Begins with a P. Prosperity.
Prosperity. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a bit of a monologue about things.
No, but it's a good one, because 100%, I can say this with confidence, 100% of my most successful coaching relationships with CEOs and executives have been when I've coached them to being a more authentic version of themselves. And when I say more authentic, you hit the nail on the head. We've got learnt behaviour and we've got natural behaviour. We've got learnt skills and we've got natural skills. And people come to me in the coaching relationship and they'll say, I struggle to do this part of my role, but I prefer this part of my role. And I'll look at what are their strengths, what are they naturally predispositioned to doing and being versus what they're actually doing and being in their current role. And then I give them the courage to step more into their natural tendencies and their learned tendencies. They really find it quite difficult sometimes, because we're taught in the corporate world that you actually just have to mould yourself into what your leadership team think you should be, or what the role should look like and be. But when they break out of that and bring more of their authentic skill set to what they're doing, and when I say bring more of their authentic skill set, who they're being, more natural, who they're being into what they're doing, every single one of them has either had a promotion awarded to them, they've had off-the-chart success in terms of performance outcomes. The people around them don't notice this dramatic shift in their behaviour. It's not like they're suddenly turning from one version of themselves into another. It's, like a Formula One pit stop. It's like micro adjustments. But then over time, they feel more in flow. They feel more satisfied with what they're doing and who they're being, and everybody benefits. So I couldn't agree with you more, that bringing more of the natural and not having so much of the learnt, because the learnt is we have to think about it, right? We have to put on the mask, we have to put on the cape, we have to, dress up into our learned behaviour. Whereas our natural state is easy, right? It just is who we are.
There's two things that really resonated there. One being the Formula One pit stops.
Yeah.
There's another metaphor, if you like. If you're sailing and you just adjust your path by 1 degree, you'll end up in a completely different place.
Yes.
Right? And the other is this mask stuff. I kind of want to explore that a bit, because a large proportion of the really senior executives I work with, when I meet, I can feel that there's the armour on, and that they're completely used to being with that armour. And I get it because I did it for 25 years, as most of us do. And it's leadership from a place of safety. We've talked about this before. Safety, where in the corporate world that shows up as not getting fired, keeping your boss happy, hitting short-term goals at any cost, making sure you get paid.
Looking good,
protecting yourself, complying, complying and controlling. And this model of leadership works in the short term. You can get things done, but it takes so much more energy and is not sustainable in the long term.
Nope.
And doesn't create long-term trusting collaborative relationships that will last beyond a role, beyond a job, or even a career.
Yeah.
The other way of being a leader is one of purpose, where, and this is your point about being authentic, if you've got courageous authenticity and connect with people and show your real care for them, which allows you to build trust. Having a focus on results as well, because you need to hit the numbers. You can't just go around hugging everyone all the time and expect to have a job in 2 years' time. But that's a different way of being when you're coming from a place of purpose, where you're, as a leader, pausing and consciously choosing how to respond to the events that happen in line with your purpose and your values.
Yes.
This is where the good stuff happens, and it's hard to put that first, that being long-term collaborative relationships.
Yes.
But the great thing is, it works. I mean,
It really does.
There's data from Ernst & Young, for goodness sake. They're accountants, and they've done research that showed that purpose-driven organisations outperform others by 42%, which is huge. They also grow 3 times quicker. Again, people are leaving this on the table because they're coming from a place of safety and just want to move into action and ticking boxes all of the time.
Yes, and I don't believe that organisations truly understand what being purpose-driven means. So when I first go into an organisation and they say, oh yeah, we've got a purpose statement and it's, communicated and there's posters everywhere, and yeah, but in your being, in your behaviour, are people actually aligned to the purpose? Can you see it show up in every conversation? Can you see it show up in every communication internally and externally? Can you see it in people's way of being? It's all well and good, right?
I'm going to interrupt.
Go.
You said this word being.
Being, I love it.
Go into a corporate and say the word being. What's the reaction?
Yeah, initially confusion, because it's not a natural word for us to use, and we as an organisation are committed to helping the mining industry become something else. And becoming something else is working on your state of being, and being shows up in the external world as behaviour. So it's what we say, it's our language, it's what we focus on, it's our physiology, but underneath that is our belief systems, our values, the stories that we tell ourselves internally, our thoughts and feelings. That's our beingness. And so we work at that level. What do you believe to be true or not about yourself as a possibility, the organisation? What do you think about? What are the repetitive thoughts that you're having that either constrain or enable you from a performance perspective? And we go underneath the behaviour to the subconscious level and to the physiological level. So the reaction that we get when we first start bringing this work to the corporate world is what you just did.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she's not here to facilitate or train us in behaviour concepts. She's here to actually have us access who we're being at a subconscious and physiological level so that we can understand ourselves better, elevate our self-awareness, and then, to your point, choose in a moment whether we're going to be connected to purpose and values and our human authentic self, or whether we're going to be connected to the action, the doing, the driving for results, but you can choose as opposed to being on autopilot.
Yeah. And what I find is there's initially absolutely no awareness of the fact that you can choose how to be.
Correct.
Because in the corporate world, all we do is get conditioned to judge our worth based on a list of achievements, things that we've done, and you get in and you write a to-do list.
Yes.
And then you go into action. You walk into a meeting and say, right, what are we going to do? Whereas that meeting, for example, could have so much a bigger impact if people walked in, sat down, at least briefly connected, and made sure that everybody was able to be present, and design briefly how they want to be together.
Yes.
And in the corporate world, that would be seen as like really woo-woo. Yet there's so much research that shows you'd have an incredible amount more impact.
Yeah.
If you just slow down a bit.
Yes,
and design this.
It's that pit stop analogy again, the micro adjustment of just focusing for a few minutes a day on who you're being. Doesn't have to be all the time. Just check in with yourself. Who am I being? Check in with your team. Who are we being at the moment, team? Is this the right way of being to achieve the outcomes we're seeking for? Just wakes your brain up out of that slumber of subconscious. It just wakes it up, and you just check in and you go, oh, actually, I'm being quite grumpy today. And being grumpy makes a difference to what I'm doing and how I'm doing it.
Huge difference.
Yeah, whereas if I stopped being grumpy and chose to be a little bit more connected to what I was doing and how I was doing it, the outcomes might be slightly different.
There was a study about the grumpy thing, actually.
Was there?
That if you go into a meeting first thing in the day, and one person walks in with a grumpy energy,
Yeah.
that is contagious, and it puts other people in a bad mood. And before you know it, it's spread around the organisation. The whole organisation is being clunky and less effective during the day. If I could go back, which thankfully I can't.
That would be terrifying, wouldn't
If
it?
I could go back in time and I was back being a CFO again, I would religiously make sure I had 15-minute slots every hour
Yeah.
to sit, recover, and reflect on what happened, how I was being, and how I want to be in the next meeting.
Yeah.
In fact, if you prepare for 15 minutes before a meeting and sit down and list your values and list what's important, really good thing to do if it's a stressful meeting, a big sales meeting, or something that means a lot to you, to sit down, write your values, and decide what that means in this context and what's important about this meeting, and how you want to be in this meeting. It actually reduces the cortisol levels in your blood by 30%.
Correct.
Which increases your IQ by about 20 points and makes you able to solve problems.
Exactly. That is one of the most fundamental methodologies that we bring to corporate. We call it setting intentions. So set your intention before a meeting, before a conversation, before you do anything. Set your being intention. It only takes a couple of minutes, and you have to be different in different conversations. This isn't about people going around, to your point, hugging, being love and light in every single conversation. Some conversations require you to be directive. They require you to be a little bit more assertive or stern in your language. They require you to bring a different physiology to get the outcome. And then there are other conversations that require you to be more compassionate, to require you to be more connected. But as long as you know what state of being is going to achieve the right outcome for you, and it takes a couple of minutes, great, crack on. But people don't do it. They sleepwalk through their lives, never mind their jobs, just allowing their subconscious programming to determine who they're being.
This is really echoing about something I want to talk about in a bit.
Good.
About conflict and how it depends, and conscious choice around that.
So, we're talking about purpose and other people being connected to purpose. What about you? Why do you do what you do?
It's all because of one day in Sweden. I spent 25 years working in some of the biggest tech and telco companies in the world. One of the fastest growing in the world at one point. And I ended up as a regional CFO for $1 billion business unit in Sony, looking after Middle East and Africa. A really big and challenging role. And they sent me on the global leadership program, and I got to toddle off to Sweden for a week each month to stay in a castle, facilitated by the Stockholm School of Economics Executive Education branch. 2 incredible coaches, a cohort of about 25. And the first phase of it was all about self-awareness, and we were doing psychometrics and assessments and this kind of thing, and I was watching the data come in, and frankly it was one of the most traumatic days of my life, because all of my self-worth was about being, you know, a successful CFO and executive and corporate, and I saw the data come in and there was some really, really anomalous results. And it was, I was really, really shocked and scared, and not curious, just scared about what this meant. Was I mentally deficient? Or luckily there was a really great coach, Tommy, who I was working with, who helped me through this process and get me to see there was just a big shift about to happen in life, and the awareness that came out of that was that I'd been pretending to be someone else for the last 25 years, which is really a lot. And that person that I was pretending to be was a massive arsehole. I was incredibly good at fighting and winning, and spent all of the time finding win-lose scenarios. And from a perspective, I was really rewarded very well for this, because I was in really toxic masculine environments. Or often, not always. But from that day onwards, everything in my life has been about first learning to become an authentic leader, and what did that even mean? And the first thing I did was find the author of the book that the leadership program was based on, a guy called Jim Tam, who I count as one of my mentors. He wrote a book called Radical Collaboration. I went and tracked Jim down and stayed with him in a castle in Belgium for 10 days while he taught me how to teach the book. And at the same time, I started training as a coach, a coactive coach, a leadership coach, a strengths coach. I was just absorbing all of this. And then it started having an impact in the teams around me, because I was being less of an arse and supporting people and trying to make them realise they didn't need to be scared of me. And of course that takes a long time, because people don't forget, the last 5 years. But it did start to have an impact. Things changed at work a lot, and I got a lot more free time and headspace. And then finally took on the role of being head of sales and marketing for North Africa and Egypt, while we were looking for someone permanent. And then during this time I was coaching, and I just really wanted other executives to go through the transition that I had, to not feel that I had to live in fear. And as a result, I started coaching full time about 4 or 5 years ago.
Wow. Amazing story.